You're talking on behalf of Shell today on a subject that I suppose has caused a lot of concern worldwide and certainly in South Africa, and that is what people know commonly as fracking. But that is only a small part of the operation, isn't it?
Yeah.
What is the entire operation and where does fracking fit in there?
Well, fracking is a process of what is used to actually release tight gas which is embedded in the rock 2 to 3 kilometers below the surface of the earth. And we need to stimulate the reserve to be able to release the carbon molecule. The conventional drilling has been where the gas is freely available underneath the surface, and we just normally just drill and extract the gas, which is free flowing underneath. But with unconventional gas, the gas molecules are embedded in the rock, and fracturing is a technique that is used to stimulate the release of those carbon molecules.
Now, the fracking side of things it means a lot of water being used. And if you're in the Karoo, there isn't very much water, but what water there is, you're bringing from underground reservoirs, bringing them up, then releasing whatever the residue left over from what you've used back into the earth. Is that correct?
No, what we're very aware that, and we've made the commitment that we will not compromise water to residents and to farmers and to agriculture. So we will not impact the water for residents in the Karoo. We will find alternative ways. So we've invested many months of water studies, creating a water atlas, looking at water sensitive areas in the Karoo to make sure that we can fulfill our commitment to South Africa around that commitment.
What percentage of chemical goes down into the ground? What percentage seeps out?
1% of the total mass of mud, of water and sand mud would be chemicals. Chemicals are used specifically to allow the lubricity of the mud to go through the hole, as well as to impact things like bacterial contamination within the mud, so that it's not, to make sure that that mud is actually effective in its fracturing process.
Has fracking, in your opinion, ever caused any underground water pollution?
Shell has drilled hundreds of wells in the past 10 years, and we haven't had one case of underground pollution and water pollution contamination.
So the answer would be no, it hasn't?
No, and that this is purely because of the standards that Shell uses. We've got very stringent operating principles. Our well integrity is one of the main things that we are concerned about, to make sure that we do not have any leakage within it. So we've got multiple layers of steel and cement that protect the water level. And we constantly monitor and check the pressure so that we know that this thing is a contained system.
Isn't the problem not deep into the earth, but more near the surface, where some of that pollutant or chemical residue ends up being? Because I'm sure you're aware on YouTube, there's a current little slot that shows somebody setting fire to water.
Yeah.
Now, how can that be?
Okay, so the water table is around, it's not deeper than 300 meters below the surface. We are drilling between 2 and 3 kilometers below the surface, and we protect the water layer with our casing and our well. What also exists is above the ground methane. So the methane exists in the earth as well. So on the surface of the earth, and it's in the air. And in certain areas where there is surface methane, that it could happen. So it's not a result of the actual fracking, our low-level drilling. It's actually currently existing.
So what we're actually saying, at low-level drilling, there is no pollution. But at groundwater level, there could be pollution.
But that exists naturally at the moment. It hasn't been caused by any activity that is a result of our exploration.
How does that happen in the middle of the Karoo?
It's happening currently. There's places in the Karoo where there's carbon in the air.
The well casings that are used are made of cement and steel.
Yep.
Am I correct? Will that last into an eternity when they're down there? Because they're not brought back up again, are they?
No, No.
So what happens to them?
So there's a very strict decommissioning process that we would go
Yes,
through.
explain that to me,
Okay,
because
so
a lot of people are very worried about cracks appearing and seepage.
And seepage. So the well is plugged, and the decommissioning process would be something that we would use throughout the world, in that we make sure that there is no seepage, there is no up things come moving up in the surface. So the whole well, in fact, is plugged, so that it doesn't actually doing. And then we would be monitoring those on a regular basis to make sure that nothing is actually being defaulting.
Are you happy for your children to drink the water in the Karoo?
Yes.
You'd be perfectly happy
Yes.
for it
Yes.
and you're not worried about a future there.
No.
So
Because
what is all the fuss about?
What I'm not worried because a company like Shell, who operates globally, would not want to ruin its reputation in a country, in any country. Things with social media, we make sure that we don't want to do things that are unethical, and we've got corporate principles that we work with, that every single action that all our employees are governed by is around honesty, integrity, and making sure that we care for the earth, looking at working with communities to make sure that we assess the impact. And we've been doing lots of work to try and understand the communities, to understand the environment. All of these studies are going to be fed into our environmental impact assessment to make sure that we can understand the receiving environment. When we introduce this operation, what the impact is going to be, how can we look for any opportunities around, and believe me, there are opportunities, because there are opportunities where there is going to be an activity in places where there's huge unemployment, poverty, huge inequality in lifestyles within the Karoo. So those opportunities we need to understand, so that we don't aggravate a situation where there's a whole lot of people entering into a place and the people in the area do not benefit from it. So we've been doing many studies, working with communities, engaging with them to try and understand what is the makeup, what is the social makeup in the Karoo. So we don't aggravate any impacts. So there's lots of social ills that our operation will not. We try to mitigate any of those impacts through our operation.
For want of a better expression, the Greenies would argue that there's a balance here. One is that you will do all these social things because it balances out the need for the economy to have oil, which we urgently need. If one looks at the economic situation that oil causes to our economy. Surely the suspicion then has to be allayed that it is not just a financial consideration, because there was a statement made by the ANC, for instance, that Shell during the apartheid years helped them considerably. So therefore one sees an alliance there. Now, taking the politics out of the situation and Shell making a profit out of this cannot be taken out of the equation. What is the balance really and truly? Is it an economic one that's necessary, or is it as a social exercise?
It's multiple, okay? In South Africa, because of the past and because of the current situation that we have of inequality, we haven't got a very resilient social makeup. So any growth or economic activity, any injection of a huge, and this is big. If we find gas, it's going to be a game changer in South Africa. And it's going to involve people moving mindsets and moving what they thought the future was going to be into a completely new realm.
Now, I talk about oil, but oil and gas go together, of
precisely,
course.
Because it's an energy source. So for me, it's Shell would not be successful. They couldn't possibly, even if we've got 100% of what they estimate of 480 TCF beneath the ground, Shell will not be able to be successful in extracting it and having an end-use market if we do not change the social makeup and build the economy through the various phases of this extraction process and through development and into production.
You missed one word out there that puzzles me in this whole social enterprise, and that's called education.
Well, it's fundamental. That's one of our biggest challenges, where we've got to invest probably the most amount of energy around how do we build the skills and capability within South Africa to ensure that South Africans can benefit. South Africans can be part of this value chain, and we do not have to import skills. So we've been doing a lot of work around mapping qualifications and what are feeder qualifications into well engineering professions. There's actually a global shortage of well engineers. So any investment in well engineers at the moment will be able to feed globally. So we're looking for opportunities like that. We're looking for opportunities where we really want to focus on the youth, because they're going to be our employers and our suppliers in the future. In 10 years, if there's gas, that's what's going to be we need that capability that to exist in South Africa. We're also focusing on smaller kids, junior school, because maths and science are feeder basic skills that need to be required in this industry. They're also skills that are required in other industries. So with the uncertainty of gas at the moment, investing in those kinds of skills now are only going to help us into the future.
How much of a guarantee can I take away from it today that the public are going to be well informed on fracking, on all aspects of it?
We're looking at different types of communication strategies. So we have people in the Karoo all the time, talking to communities, talking to institutions, talking to whoever they can find that would want to speak about it. And we're wanting to make sure that everybody has the right information and correct and accurate information to make an opinion about it. So it's not about influencing them to say it's positive, just have correct information.
There has got to be a continual upfront, what we would call transparent. It's a country we live in.
No, absolutely. And I think if there was a chance that we were not sure that we can apply the best principles in South Africa that we've been applying globally, we wouldn't be doing this in South Africa. The risk and the reputational risk and the fact that it's a flawed technology, we wouldn't be investing millions of dollars into an activity that we're not sure of. So we are sure that through the information and the studies that we do beforehand, we narrow down those risks totally.
But there are risks.
Well, there would always be risks. What we say is that we are sensitive areas. If there's high water sensitive areas, if there's heritage sites we avoid, if there's high population areas where there's huge activity, during an exploration phase, we've got 90,000 square kilometers in the Karoo to drill 24 wells. We have flexibility around where we can drill as well. So we eliminate layers of, well, we're not forced to have to drill in a heritage site. We can exclude it quite comfortably. And because we've got a horizontal fracking, you can exclude quite a lot of data. There's a lot of flexibility around where we can actually put our well pad and explore. So we have that flexibility which we're using, and that criteria around where we place our well pads will be given to the public to vet and to give us input into through the environmental impact assessment.
Let's finish on a positive note. Let's say we are successful with the drilling there in South Africa, and we find multiple beds. What's it going to mean?
So we've commissioned a study with econometrics to say, from an economic perspective, what would it mean if we find 10% and 5% scenario of the gas that is projected through the International Energy Association. So they've projected 485 TCF, trillion cubic feet. Now we need to, in context, in a South African context, Moss gas was developed on a find of 1 TCF of gas. So if we find 5, and we know what Mossel Bay looks like now, after 20 years down the line. So if we find 5 TCF, it would mean that it would create about 300,000 jobs. It would be 3.6% addition to the GDP. So it's an incredible change that would happen in South Africa over the next 20 years if this happens. If we find 10 TCF, it's going to be 900,000 jobs.
So what will you say to the Gheneez?
To the Gheneez, I'll say that, look, we need them to keep us in check. You know, that we need to be held accountable for our actions, but we would also want them to trust us in a way that would make us because we know that as a global company with high operating standards, that we do have technology that will allow South Africa to get the benefits of a local energy source.
When are we liable to see the first well being sunk?
So we're waiting for our exploration license to be awarded, if it is getting awarded during this process. So once we have an exploration license, we will then go into an environmental impact assessment, and that's likely to take 2 years to get that environmental approval. And that process will be where we do public participation. We go through various studies around the process, very specifically in the Karoo. We also need to do seismic activity, which is basically trucks which picture through, which try to create a picture of the underground. And then all that information gets pulled together. We process that information. So we're likely to only drill the first well in about 3 years' time.